Yinshin gazed at him coldly, his eyes devoid of empathy as he shook the blood from his blade. The leader's body collapsed lifelessly. Though Yinshin's technique lacked depth due to its creation without formal sword training, it remained effective enough to overwhelm his opponent with surprise moves. The two warriors of Desolate Fortress swiftly eliminated the three attackers who had targeted Haya, leaving the martial master from the Zhongnan sect in stunned silence. Meanwhile, the martial masters from the same sect successfully subdued the rest of the enemy force. With the battle concluded, Wenchang surveyed the surroundings, his expression seemingly boasting the strength of the Desolate Fortress. The fight had unfolded with the two warriors managing to defeat three adversaries whom the Zhongnan sect's martial artists had struggled to handle. In military terms, it had resembled the destruction of an independent enemy unit. A wide grin spread across Haya's face as she rushed toward her uncle, relief evident in her every movement, grateful that everything had ended well. The realization of their mistake settled among the martial artists from the Zhongnan sect. One of them, clasping his hands together with the others, acknowledged their earlier misjudgment and offered an apology for their rudeness. Holding Haya in his arms, Yinshin received their words with indifference. The martial artists of the Zhongnan sect, having trained in the mountains, carried a purity in their demeanor. Having once shown either pride or jealousy, they now found themselves unable to suppress admiration for Yinshin after witnessing his martial prowess and the rescue he had provided. Some even attempted to engage him in conversation, though their efforts were soon interrupted by the return of the Zhongnan Sword Immortal and Manhwa, who had finished their battles. The Peerless Master and the Cloud Sword Dragon descended gracefully. Manhwa's gaze quickly settled on the fallen enemies, their lifeless forms still drenched in fresh blood. The Zhongnan Sword Immortal, having already taken in the scene before him, addressed Yinshin with a sense of gratitude. A debt had been incurred by Zhongnan. Still holding Haya, Yinshin dismissed the notion of debt, claiming that he had only been protecting his niece. However, the Zhongnan Sword Immortal shook his head at this dismissal. He spoke of Haya's future, asserting that she would one day become a pillar of Zhongnan, following in Manhwa's path. For the sect, such an act of protection was indeed a significant favor. Acknowledging the sentiment, Yinshin expressed gratitude in return. Carefully, Yinshin lowered Haya to the ground. His actions suggested an intent to do something else. A request followed as Yinshin took up his sword once more. He wished to train for a moment. Both Manhwa and the Zhongnan Sword Immortal observed him with discerning eyes, their curiosity piqued by his intent. There was no need for them to move aside, he stated. The rising sensation within him would not let go. The Zhongnan Sword Immortal immediately recognized the signs. The boy had gained an insight. Without hesitation, he instructed the martial artists of the Zhongnan sect to step back. At the same time, Yinshin's gaze shifted toward the Swordmaster's cliff. The confrontation with the Tyrant Sword sect member had refined his realization. With measured movements, Yinshin unsheathed his desolate sword. Sunlight filtered through in sharp streaks, reflecting against the pristine white blade as it extended beneath the controlled motion of his grip. As the sword moved, it carved an enigmatic pattern in the air, its arc following the precision of his swinging arm. No external energy manifested, only the smooth trajectory of the blade. Yet, upon its surface, the sunlight seemed to become momentarily captured, as though drawn toward it. The sight alone caused the Zhongnan Sword Immortal's eyes to widen in astonishment. However, despite the brilliance of the desolate sword, its radiance faltered. Unable to maintain the progress, the glow dimmed. A heavy breath escaped Yinshin as he lowered the sword. Following the intended trajectory had not been enough. His true energy had failed to rise in accordance with his will. The realization struck. Just as he had always forged his own martial path, the sword traces on the cliff seemed to whisper the same directive. His sword was his own to find. With conviction, Yinshin turned away from the cliff, rejecting the notion of inheriting the sword master's legacy. That trace, he explained, illustrated a specific path. The message it conveyed urged him to expand his perception beyond its confines. The Zhongnan Sword Immortal acknowledged the words with wisdom. It was said that the traces left by a great master who founded a sect contained spiritual energy, a force that transcended the boundary between martial arts and sorcery. The sword master, he mused, had likely possessed the same depth. To commune with such an imprint was a sign of fortune and talent aligning. Yinshin absorbed the elder's words, contemplating them in silence. His curiosity led him to ask about the final years of the swordmaster's life. Confirmation came swiftly. The revered master had indeed spent his last days within Zhongnan. A connection to the Zhongnan sect masters was inevitable, but the realization remained clear. The Zhongnan sword style, deeply embedded in its teachings, did not suit his body. Mastering it would be inefficient. Intrigued by his conclusion, Manhwa addressed him with respectful curiosity. She wished for a more detailed explanation. The restoration of the nine-yang unified technique, he stated, fell under the responsibility of the great hero Cloud Sword Dragon. However, he offered a small measure of assistance if she wishes for it. The implication caused Manhwa's thoughts to stir. Assistance in restoring the sword technique. Such an offer carried great significance. The weight of those words settled upon her. Uncertainty formed in her expression as she sought confirmation. Yinshin offered no further elaboration. Instead, he took several measured steps away, creating distance. A single word followed, commanding attention. Observe. He revealed that his training was incomplete. The realization settled within Yinshin as he moved forward with deliberate steps, observed intently by Manhwa. A peculiar experience accompanied the sight of the sword trace on the cliff. As Yinshin unsheathed his sword once more, an illusion unfolded within his mind. Heaven and earth overturned and collapsed into a singular line. The radiance of his sword ignited anew. What followed was the manifestation of a technique shaped through inspiration drawn from the ancient markings on the cliff. Every motion carried the weight of newfound understanding. The realization struck, if sheer speed were enough to dominate an opponent, then there existed a reason why techniques, such as the Taiji Wisdom Sword and Plum Blossom Sword, held renown throughout the martial world. Movements unfolded in seamless fluidity, each stroke resembling a dance. A deeper truth revealed itself. An elevated sword technique extended beyond mere blade wielding. The essence within its forms intertwined with inner energy and swordsmanship, crafting a harmony unseen before. Manhwa's gaze remained unwavering, as though the act of blinking had been forgotten entirely. Until now, true understanding of the sword had remained elusive. This thought coursed through Yinshin's mind as the glow of his pure, white, desolate blade illuminated the space around him. In that instant, the legacy of the great sword master did not merely endure. It soared to greater heights in the hands of a new generation. The sword no longer stopped its succession. It ventured beyond, reaching toward a higher sky. Tears traced down the deeply lined face of the Zhongnan sword immortal, their weight carrying the passage of distant years. A quiet whisper escaped him, an acknowledgement of the revered sword master. Despite lacking the refinement he aspired to, Yinshin's swordsmanship radiated brilliance. The technique he forged embodied his own ideals, a life akin to an unceasing light, filling the world much like the sun, moon, and stars. The technique itself reflected this nature, its characteristic movement spreading light along its trajectory. A voice, laced with pride, broke the moment's silence. Wenchang, chest puffed with admiration, inquired about the name of the sword technique. Yinshin, turning slightly, acknowledged the question. He already decided on the name of the sword technique. Radiant sword style. His gaze fell upon the desolate sword, still gleaming with the hues of twilight. Nodding in understanding, Wenchang exhaled, harboring no envy, only pride for his fellow warrior. Radiant sword style, a technique seizing the world's brilliance, cutting decisively through all obstacles. If perfected, it could encompass heaven and earth, wielding influence over the whole world. As night descended, the two warriors of Desolate Fortress settled within the accommodations provided to them. Reflection accompanied Yinshin's quiet moments. Much had been gained from this place. The rescue of his niece, the creation of his own sword technique. Though he had done nothing tangible for the Zhongnan sect, their treatment of him as an honored guest remained unchanged. A sense of unease accompanied such generosity. Wenchang, however, displayed no such concerns. A declaration of intent escaped him, voiced with an air of casual delight. The golden tea of Zhongnan should be taken back upon their return. His demeanor bore no trace of tension, as if effortlessly overcoming enemies had been a simple matter. Gratitude followed, directed toward Yinshin. Thanks to his achievements, such kindness had been extended by the Zhongnan sect. Yet Yinshin's thoughts strayed. The image of Wenchang in battle resurfaced, an expression different from the one worn now. In that moment, Wenchang's eyes had carried the weight of countless past encounters, each one resolved through decisive, lethal intent. Everyone carried their own stories. That conclusion settled within Yinshin, dismissing any desire to dwell further on the matter. A pleasant voice, clear and soft, interrupted the stillness, calling for Yinshin. Recognition flickered across Wenchang's face immediately. Without hesitation, Yinshin stepped outside, leaving behind the mixed expression upon Wenchang's face, tinged with envy. Beyond the threshold, Manhwa awaited, unchanged from their first encounter. The same feather adorned her hair, her martial attire of sky blue and peach flowing in the night breeze. A matter left unspoken before it brought her here. The subject of the sword master's trace surfaced in their exchange, acknowledged with a simple nod. Under the quiet company of the moonlight, conversation unfolded. A confession followed, laced with both resolve and honesty. She desired to step beyond the lingering shadow of the swordmaster. In both chivalry and the path of the sword, an independent course must be carved. The aim was clear, to become a great master in her own right. Her ambition, expressed before someone younger, carried a weight of its own. Something within her demeanor had shifted, altered by the sight of Yinshin's radiant sword style. Her reputation as the Zhongnan sect's strongest rising talent seemed well-founded. A response followed, steady and composed. Yinshin stated that he would support her. For a fleeting moment, a subtle deflation marked her reaction, though composure quickly returned. A slight smile played upon Yinshin's lips. Meanwhile, within Manhwa's mind, thoughts stirred, a contemplation of whether the restoration of the Nine-Yang unified technique could truly be within reach. And with that, the chapter comes to an end. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more updates. Let's meet again in the next video. Until then, enjoy.